Welcome back to the Soundtracker Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Peacock. So this is not the official start of Season 3. The official start will be in a week, maybe two. It just depends on how things go with this recording I have coming up. This between season thing has been kind of nice, actually. I have been stressing, but it's been, I'm excited to get back to it. I've been very busy, actually, just lining things up for next year. I posted some things on Twitter the other day, but just to give some examples of what I have coming up. This is not close to everything, but just some examples. Natural Born Killers, Valley Girl, Long Kiss Goodnight, Big Lebowski, Bullet Train, Last Action Hero, Kids, Rocky IV, Young Guns 2, Who's the Man, Zodiac, Donnie Darko, Back to the Future, Basketball. I just lined up Hot Rod. I got a whole bunch of things. So I'm very excited to get into Season 3. But again, it'll be another week, maybe two. So what you're getting today is an unlocked bonus episode. It's Will Menaker talking about Belly with me. Will is coming back again for Season 3 also. We're lining that up. We don't know what he's doing yet, but we're working on that. But while I'm talking about bonus episodes, I do have to talk about the Patreon again because the show is at a bit of a crucial point. Without getting too into detail here, I've got things going on with nursing homes and just our shitty healthcare system. And if things shake out in the worst way, and it looks like they're going to, it could lead to me having to take on a second job because there's going to be some extra things that I have to sort of foot. And if that happens, that would be the end of the show. There's no time for this if I have to do a second job. Now, I've said before that I do not want this show to be something that I do for a living, but if I could make it a decent source of supplemental income, hey, that'd be great. And it would also keep me from having to do that. Now, we're at a point with this show where I have enough listeners that, like, if even a fourth or a third of you were to subscribe to the $3 tier, which is just a cup of coffee a month, it's basically a tip, I could absolutely keep doing this show without having to think about a second job. Now, the $3 doesn't get you any of the long bonus episodes, but I will be doing a third bonus episode every month. I had talked about this a few months ago that would be available for all tiers. This one would not be the regular format. It would basically be me, myself, talking about recommendations, things I've seen over the course of the month, because I do watch a lot of movies outside of this particular show. I don't just watch movies for the show, or recommendations in general. I do a lot of things. I read books. I play a lot of games. It could be something that I've enjoyed, or a whole hodgepodge of things that I've enjoyed over the previous month. I am going to possibly dig into albums that I've talked about and further listening that I've said, or great albums that I've not had a chance to really dig into. I could do something like that, get a little further into those. But it is really important that this show can't go on, just again, without getting too into detail. I mean, I think everybody listening to this is probably pretty on board with how bad the system is. And it's really close to kneecapping the show, unfortunately. But again, the hope here is that I can keep this going. But again, that cannot happen without listener support. And I can't emphasize that enough. So, and as far as the diamond tier, the $8 tier, no matter what happens, I will continue delivering bonus episodes, and I will do the mini series that I had spoken about. And that is something I'm planning on doing very shortly here. I'm going to do the first mini series anyways, is going to be Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. I'm going to run through that series, at least the first handful of games, and talk about the soundtracks for those, get different guests on. And I'm looking very forward to that. Just when I get the extra time here, which is hopefully in the next few months, I will be able to get those recorded and get those out as promised. But yeah, I'm very excited for this year. And I just hope that everything aligns, that I can keep this going, because I've got so much good stuff lined up and I've got so many things planned. And again, without the support, it's going to be tough to make it happen, but that's www.patreon.com/soundtracker, and hopefully I don't have to make that tough decision here probably about March, but we'll see. Okay. But that's enough of that. We're going to get to the episode now. It's Belly, and I will see you all with Natural Born Killers in either 1 or 2 weeks. And I hope that we're all having a wonderful 2023. Welcome back, all my lovely patrons. So today I'm joined by Will Menaker. He's back to talk Belly, and I'm going to get right to it. I hope you enjoy.
Ain't no use running, ain't nowhere to hide. The beast is coming and he's got you in his sights. He ain't gonna miss you and he ain't gonna mess around. If you're a movie with original songs, the soundtrack are gonna track you down. Oh yeah.
All right, everyone, welcome back. So here we are. It's bonus episode number 4. And joining me, coming back to the show, is Will Menaker. And we're doing Belly today. Will, how are you?
Just feeling just enlivened by all of the knowledge and wisdom contained in the film Belly. It's good to be here with you. I wish I were on a park bench smoking a blunt the size of a human femur bone with you, because that's the feeling that Belly really instills in you.
The reason we're doing this, I mean, I wanted to have you back at some point, and it was just one of those. My goal was to go through the first year without any return guests, but once I started doing bonus episodes, I was like, well, fuck, I don't care at that point. Main episodes, I wanted to make it through a whole year without having to like go back. And I've seen you talk about Belly. I've wanted to do Belly, and I've seen you talk about Belly on Twitter a bunch of times, and you were somebody who, like, I love Belly, and I think it's this gonzo masterpiece of filmmaking. I think it's incredible. And I've seen you refer to it, if not in those exact words, something along those lines. So I was just like, I floated the idea, let's do Belly, and you were very gracious about it. You were down to do it. And so I'm glad to have you here talking about it with me.
Well, I think gonzo masterpiece is exactly the correct way to categorize Belly. I mean, just to get into it, like it's a movie that, like, like many true works of art, I really did not like the first time I saw it, because when this movie came out, and I'm from New York City, and like that 90s era when, like, DMX, Nas, Jay-Z, like Mobb Deep, Noriega, fucking the Locks, like that, they were it. Like that was king. So and this movie to come out starring Nas and DMX, Method Man, directed by fucking Hype Williams, like the king of rap music videos, like the peak of 90s rap music. Like, me and my friends were so excited for this movie because we thought it was going to be like our generation's Scarface. And then when we saw it, it was like just an utterly baffling experience. A movie that was, like, at times incomprehensible. We found the plot impossible to follow and laughable at times. But that was when I was a young man and not as mature in my artistic taste as I am now. Now I realize it really is a brilliant, brilliant movie.
Well, and that's one of the, so obviously we'll get more into this as we get into the movie discussion, but that's one of those things that it's shocking to me. Something I was going to bring up here when I talk about the movie, and I guess I'll just get this part out of the way now, is that this is a movie that seems to have developed, it's definitely a cult film at this point, but it's developed. I think that a lot of people had that same arc with this, where when they first saw it, it was, you said, baffling, but as they've gotten older, they've grown to appreciate it more. And this still sits right now at a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. Like, this is one that has not had that critical reevaluation yet. But
the fans are stupid swine. The average viewer, the average movie goer, their opinions are irrelevant.
Well, I'm glad. Yeah, I'm really glad to have you here, because I think Belly is one of those movies that, I'm glad that it has had that sort of reappraisal, if not critically, enough to develop a cult following like it seems to have at this point, because it's a movie that feels, just from that opening sequence, tailor-made to become a cult hit at some point.
Yeah.
And it seems to have done so. So do a little background here. So Belly opened November 4th, 1998, which was a Wednesday. And like I said, pretty scathing reviews. It still to this day holds a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. There was a bunch of controversy around it too. Critics were condemning it for its demeaning depictions of African-American men. Furthermore, Magic Johnson's theater chain banned the film from being shown on its screens due to, and this is a direct quote, negative and violent depictions of African Americans. So it was controversial and not very critically lauded. And despite this, one thing it was roundly lauded for, and I'm sure that this is something we're going to dig into here, is its visual style.
Yeah.
The main gripes were plot-wise. And
I mean, it's like, honestly, like the visual style kind of cut the movie's throat, because like the reason the movie it looks different from the beginning to the end is because they ran out of money on all the insane lighting that they were doing in the first half of the movie. So like the lushness and just like the meticulous like creation of like these like hyper real like indoor like like the club scene in the beginning, or just like the incredible lighting in this movie was just too good, and they literally ran out of money while filming it. So like the last third of the movie like looks a lot more DIY than like the fucking Stanley Kubrick like opening sequence.
It really is jarring watching it last night. I actually watched this. I watched this the night DMX died. It was like, this is what I decided to pop on, was Belly. I hadn't seen it in a while. And so what years, a year ago, maybe. So it had been a year since I'd last seen it. And watching it for this, that was one of the things that I really noticed, because I do have some information too, as far as the where the budget ran out. It was mostly on that opening sequence where most of the budget went. But you do notice it. But I like the way that the back half has that grimy look, because
yeah,
I really do think this movie I kind of get some of the gripes as far as the plot goes. At the very least in the first hour, because it is one of those, up to that point, aside from the visual aesthetic, been there, done that sort of feel. It's got a lot of similar beats and character arcs, and then it goes completely in this way fucking bonkers direction in the final act.
Like when Frank Vincent recruits DMX for the CIA to assassinate Louis Farrakhan. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes. It is. So
that's why it's a brilliant movie.
I know it was so much balls behind this, especially for a first-time director like Hype William. I mean, I realized he had made his bones.
His only time director. This is his one bite at the apple. I mean, it's like Icarus. I love movies like that. It reminds me of sort of like Richard Kelly in Southland Tales. It's just like, the scope of the ambition is so great that the sun melts the wax on your wings and you plummet back down to earth. But it's insane that they never let Hype Williams direct another movie. I mean, come on. Look at the talent on display there. And it's funny, I wasn't aware of that, about how the Magic Johnson theater chain refused to screen this movie because of its what does it say, negative depictions of negative and violent depictions of Black men. And it's just I don't know. I mean, that seems quaint in a way. I mean, I think we're very used to this kind of criticism of art now, where if it depicts a bad person, then the movie is bad. But this is a movie about negative and violent men, so it would be a little bit, I don't know, dishonest for that not to be part of the plot, or I don't know, to have nothing negative or violent depicted. I mean, this is a movie about bad people, but also it's a movie about both of the main characters do achieve for themselves a certain kind of grace and redemption from the evil negative lifestyle that they're profiting from.
One of the gripes that I saw too is that it's an unearned redemption for both of the characters, and I don't agree with that. But I guess I could see that gripe. But I think my problem is the idea that you have to earn
it's a story. It earns it whether you buy into the story or not, or whether you buy into the characters. That's the only thing that needs to be earned. It's does Nas deserve to jet off to Africa with his family and live happily after I don't know, selling heroin and killing people for the first half of his life? I mean, I don't know, probably not, but none of it's real. It didn't happen. So you can rest assured that no one is getting away scot-free.
Well, it's like that famous quote, deserves got nothing to do with it.
Yeah, exactly. Another point I just want to make about how stunning a movie, just how powerful the style is, and just the vision of the movie is so powerful that it in my opinion succeeds despite featuring in Nas what I regard as probably the worst performance by a leading man in any movie I've ever seen. Nas is such a fucking bad actor, but DMX is a great actor, and DMX is fucking amazing in that role as fucking what's his name, Tommy?
Yeah, Buns.
Buns is such an incredible character, and it's I guess it's DMX is not exactly reaching too far for his or already his kind of stage persona, but he is so magnetic and such a good fucking compelling gangster character that I completely forget about how fucking Nas is just fucking sleepwalking in this movie. It's every bit of dialogue he delivers is painful, and his voiceover narration is some of the funniest shit ever put in a movie.
Well, there's a reason that DMX is the one that ended up going on to have the movie career after this.
Yeah.
That's one of those things too, watching this the night that DMX died. DMX's death hit me, it hit me a lot harder than I expected it to. I always liked DMX, but it just was one of those ones that watching this movie, I did a whole, Never Die Alone. I did a whole bunch of DMX movies in the few days following when he passed. And unless, for people who weren't alive when DMX, or maybe too young when DMX first came on the scene, it really is hard to overstate what a force of fucking nature DMX was in his, it's dark and hell is hot, flesh of my flesh, blood of my blood days. And what a charismatic ball of lightning he was he was just, it's so easy to see watching this why he was for a minute the biggest star on the planet. He was incredible.
Just a live wire, and in the Buns character, you really get that sense of this guy could do anything at any moment. So you never feel safe or predictable in his behavior or what he's going to do, because it's just he's so, the intensity and the volatility of him is so is so great that like I love that feeling of like you never really feel safe in yourself when he's on screen. Like, you never feel like like is anything bad going to happen to him, or what horrible thing he's going to do to some other person? But it just everything is up for grabs whenever he's on screen.
Yeah, and he actually fluctuates between, like you said, he can be, and I think he did this a lot in his raps too, where he could go from like pure menace to extremely charismatic, and he goes back and forth in this movie between, like the scene when he beats up Black in the apartment. They're all goofing and having a good time.
Yeah, and he makes them strip, and yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah,
it just flips a switch, and like you said, that's why you never totally know exactly what's going on in Bun's head. You never totally feel safe when he's on screen in this. Well, all right. So one of the quotes that I saw about this that I really liked, it just backing up what we've been saying about this movie, is Chris Davenport of Complex actually doubled down hard on this film's legacy and the influence, and wrote, the direct quote was that Hype Williams blazed a trail in Black cinema that some filmmakers are only just now starting to understand and build upon. So this is, while it, like I said, maybe sitting at a 16% on Rotten Tomatoes, I do feel like it's a movie that more people have learned to understand over time. And I'm glad to see that. So hopefully anybody who's listening to this that has not seen it is inspired to go check it out. Because I don't think we'll do quite justice as to how weird this movie can get.
It's deeply weird, and it's like it's so ballsy about like just how weird so much of it is, and just how essentially kind of vaporous and sort of like hard to define the plot is. Because I mean, it's like it's almost incomprehensible at points. But I think what Hype Williams was really doing that was very ahead of his time was that like he was a vibes-based director. This is not a plot-based film, and I think that's what like the high school version of me was so turned off and disappointed by this movie, because I was expecting, like the rap 90s rap version of like Scarface or Goodfellas, which is very much about like, you're in the moment with these characters, you're following them on this arc, this rise and fall, and like there's a little bit of that in Belly, but it really is more just about like this like this sort of like the narcotic seduction of like of just evil, and just like living in this evil world with these characters and just sort of feeling it rather than like understanding it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And the whole thing looks like a 90-minute music video. You can see his music video. And I don't mean that in a bad way. One of the reviews that I saw on Rotten Tomatoes, and this is typically one that would make me roll my eyes, like a quote like this, but it's a movie where the style becomes the substance, and I kind of feel like that's accurate. Like I think for any other movie, I would see that quote and like do the jerk off motion, but like it's so accurate for this movie that, yeah, I mean, you take away that visual style and you'd probably have an all right movie. But when you toss in Hype Williams, and I wish, one of the things I found out too going through this is that he was actually attached to do Speed Racer at one point. And holy shit,
really?
when I've looked, yes. Which, I mean, look, the Wachowskis gave us a pretty fucking bonkers version of that movie as is, so I can't be mad about what we got, but it is kind of interesting to think, looking at this, what Hype Williams could have done with Speed Racer and a huge budget.
And like, I mean, like, yeah, like I think the style of this movie is the substance, and whether you think that's a criticism, I mean, because like, usually that's used as a criticism, and like a lot of films do like lean way more on style and nothing else. But to me, like the style of this movie, like it's not really a critique of the movie, because I mean, the style is so good, but also like, there's something about how there's something really apocalyptic about this movie, and I think the style like sort of communicates the substance in how well Hype Williams sort of juxtaposes this canvas of this dreamy nighttime like neon world, and these like beautifully appointed interiors and houses that these characters move in and out of, and just like contrasted with like just the absolute like squalor and oppression and exploitation of the world that Buns and Tommy inhabit.
Yeah, it's he pulls off quite a feat here, I think, and it sucks that people didn't appreciate it at the time. And I'm trying to think, because I didn't see this in theaters because it didn't come anywhere near me. So this is one that I didn't catch until, and this was like my freshman year of college that this came out. So like I was like, I didn't have like a DVD player. I didn't have, so I don't think I actually saw this until maybe a year or so after it came out. But and by then I think maybe it was too, because I went into it hearing that it was really shitty. You know how sometimes that happens, like you hear a lot. Blair Witch 2 is one that I can think of here that I watched recently and felt completely different about. But when I first saw it, I had heard just for like a year that it was like the worst movie ever. And I watched it and I was like, no, it's not that bad. And I pretty much took to this one immediately. But again, that's after a year of hearing that it wasn't good from people that saw it and that the reviews were terrible. So you go in with like lowered expectations, but I'm happy to say that over the years, this one has managed to hold up, unlike some movies that I go into and have that that sort of experience with. Okay, so the top 10, the week that this movie came out, it actually ended up it debuted at number 9 the week that it came out with the $3.5 million take on a $3 million budget. It went on to make around $10 million in theaters. So it was still fairly successful because it wasn't a wide release. It wasn't one that advertising was cramming marketing, down the throats of everybody in every city in the United States to get people to see it. So it ended up being somewhat profitable, just not a huge hit. But the top 10 the week that it released was number 1 was The Waterboy.
Classic.
It's so funny to kind of piece those times together. I didn't realize that The Waterboy, I always fuck shit up in my head as far as when timing of things. And I do it a lot with this movie and like people on the soundtrack too. There's, Ja Rule on the soundtrack and not realizing that he hadn't had his first album until a year after this movie came out is one of those things that like doesn't seem right to me in my head. But I didn't realize that The Waterboy and this were out at the same time in theaters. Number 2 was The Siege.
Okay, I remember that one. Directed by Edward Zwick. What if New York was attacked by terrorists? Sort of a prescient film in some ways and not in others.
Number 3 was Pleasantville.
Okay, yeah.
Number 4 was Ants.
All right, classic.
Number 5 was The Wizard of Oz re-release, which
so this movie was losing to a movie that came out 70 years ago.
and 2 movies that I don't even remember existing coming up. Number 6, Living Out Loud. I don't know if you remember that.
Don't remember that one.
Danny DeVito, Queen Latifah, and Holly Hunter. I had to look it up.
Okay.
Number 7, Practical Magic, another one I don't remember, but
I do remember that one. It was like Nicole Kidman and Sandra Bullock. They're like sisters who are a coven of witches, shit like that. Yeah, romantic comedy.
Yep, that is one that I saw that, and that meant nothing to me when I saw it. Number 8, our boy John Carpenter's Vampires.
Let's go, yes sir.
And number 9, as I said, was Belly, and number 10 was Rush Hour.
Oh, okay. Well, I assume Rush Hour had been out for a while at that point. Rush Hour was a big hit.
Yeah, it was probably like its 10th week or something by this point. Belly barely scraped by it. Okay, a few background things. There really wasn't much on this, but Belly was originally written by Nas. This is based on a short story that Nas had written. While filming, the production was mired by frequent clashes between Williams and the producers, budget constraints, cast members showing up drunk or high or late. Much of the $3 million budget was literally used up on that opening scene. So like that all was filmed in the Tunnel nightclub in New York City. Williams said he wanted a shiny look to forecast what the hip hop genre was going to look like in the new millennium, which is why that scene kind of looks the way that it does. Jay-Z was at one time considered for the film's title role. Now, when it said, I didn't know when it said title role, I don't know if that meant Buns or I can't imagine him in either of those roles.
No, I cannot imagine Jay-Z acting in any movie or let alone in either of these two characters. I mean, like he would have been worse than Nas, and that's saying something.
Well, and this is okay. When I talk about my times being fucked up, there's this long-standing rumor that because of budgetary constraints, all of the houses and vehicles in the movie belong to the artists. Most notably, the White House that Buns owns in the movie was actually one of DMX's homes in Florida. Hype Williams just recently in a 20-year reunion interview said that was completely false because DMX wasn't even a star yet. He was living in Yonkers at that point in the middle of nowhere. And I forget that like when by the time the movie came out, he had released his album, but like prior, when they were filming this movie, DMX was still relatively unknown. Like he hadn't put It's Dark and Hell is Hot out yet. He had just released his first single probably about the time that they were filming this. So it feels like DMX had been like a long established star by the time this came out in my head, but I forget that he was like pretty fresh to being very famous about the same time that the movie came out because Get At Me Dog released in February of 1998, which is like probably when this movie was being edited.
Well, I mean, it's again ballsy of them to make him the lead, but as you said, you can totally see how he became in this movie, like how he dominated the music industry and like the entire genre of rap for like that period of like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah. So the scene with Sincere and the 12-year-old boy on the park bench, which is like
that's my favorite scene in the movie.
It's incredible. I love that his Sincere sitting there telling that kid like, don't get wrapped up in this lifestyle. He lets the kid like he shares a blunt with this 12-year-old kid. He's like
it is because the scene it comes out of nowhere and it feels totally different than any other scene in the movie, but it's just something about the back like where he's just like sitting there and receiving wisdom and like sort of hard-bitten life lessons from a 12-year-old getting high on a park bench. And you said production was plagued by actors showing up drunk and high. Another thing that makes Belly a truly unique movie is that I really think that Belly holds the record for like most marijuana consumed on screen, and not like stunt marijuana. Like someone is smoking a blunt or like a spliff the size of your arm in like every scene of this movie, and I can guarantee you none of that was like stunt weed. That was that was supplied by the cast themselves. Everyone is high as shit in every scene of this movie and like smoking on screen. Like the amount of weed consumed in this movie is heroic.
And you are right, because one of the facts, and I didn't even bother including it just because I figured it was probably a given, but every time you see someone smoking weed on screen, they're smoking real weed. None of that was stunt weed. So.
Authenticity.
But that scene on the park bench is based on, it's a direct reference to the song One Love off of Illmatic. That whole sequence was based off of that verse in that song. So this is something I never noticed, and I couldn't see it last night when I watched. So Shamik, your Method Man, when he escapes that shootout in the police, the driver is Ghostface, but you really can't see him.
Oh, really? I did not clock that at all.
Yeah, I had no idea. So the minister in this movie, the stand-in for Louis Farrakhan, is played by Dr. Benjamin Chavez, who was the executive director of the NAACP from 93 to 94. You know, sort of a cameo, I guess, which explains why his acting is not necessarily the strongest at the end when he gives that speech that turns DMX's life around. But he fills the role really well because he probably has lived in this sort of, he's probably had to, you know, he's a guy who's given lots of speeches in his life. It's just, you could tell that this one was one that he was trying to act along with, and it didn't come through quite as well. But, you know, I never thought about this before too. This is funny. Nas, you know, on the cover is seen wearing a suit and tie in the poster, but at no point in this movie has he dressed in any formal attire during the actual film. Like that's like, it's like a complete stylistic thing. And so, yeah, okay. So that's all I had on this one. So yeah, you know, DMX's legacy is always going to be, I think, deeply tied to specifically the years of like 98 to 2001, I think is when he was really at his peak. And it was, you know, he was doing, or no, probably a little later than that, because he was still doing movies with like Seagal and stuff into like 2003. But it's just, again, like I said, crazy, just right away in this movie when it starts, that incredible opening that we talked about, you can tell that DMX was something special. Like his narration works, as you said. Nas's narration doesn't work, and oftentimes narration in movies doesn't work. But I think it's also because there's so many of his albums where he has interludes where he's basically doing the narration that he does on this, that he's been practiced at it. But you just tell from the opening scene where he's walking through that club, he doesn't even say anything. Like he just walks into the bathroom and gives that girl that look as she's stepping out. Like he was something completely special. Back to Life is what a song choice for that opening montage of them walking through the club. It's unfortunate it didn't make the soundtrack, but that a cappella version of Back to Life is just a like chef's kiss choice for this.
And they have all like the crazy like eyes. They look like fucking aliens and shit. Like it's all the black light stuff. It's so cool.
And it changes to like a whole other world. Like the beginning scenes is them like getting out of the car, and it hasn't hit that. Because I forgot last night watching it. I thought that it immediately started with them walking into the club. So I forgot that there was like a prelude to that. And it's like, you know, the narration, and then they like get out of the car at the club and they walk in. And as soon as they step in the club, it's like they've stepped into a completely other world. Like it just completely shifts gears on the look of the film. And I mean, this movie would be a 5 out of 10 based on that opening scene alone, like the weird angles, the editing choices, the color palette. But then you get that really awesome robbery, those white masks that they wear. They just, yeah, it's such a strong opening sequence for this movie.
And then, you know, what do you do after doing a robbery and a murder in a nightclub? You go back to your friend's house and watch Gummo on his giant projector. And just the inclusion of Harmony Korine's Gummo in this movie is just, again, such a funny, like, out of left field choice that just works so beautifully well with it. Like Nas doesn't get the movie. He's like, what the fuck is this bugged out shit?
Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Sincere and Mark. And I like that Mark is Hassan Johnson from The Wire. Like he's even though he doesn't last very long in this, but yeah, both of them are like, what are we watching right now? Which is like, I feel like that's a fair reaction to getting Gummo dropped on you after a robbery.
That's getting Gummo dropped on you at any time. It would you know, might inspire that reaction among anyone. So, you know, it's sort of making these characters just a little bit relatable, you know, even if you've never robbed or killed anyone yourself.
Well, and then there's two. I like the look of it. The way it changes too from the totally awash in blue look of the club to Bun's house, which is
pure like, white. Yeah.
Yes, with just some black patches on the wall. You know, there's black. It's just white and black, except for when you go to his bedroom, which is again that completely blue hue that everything has. There's two incredible 90s signifiers, by the way, in Bun's house in that sequence. And one of them is a pager, and the other one is a Kurt Loder cameo. Like they like right.
Oh yeah. It's like MTV News is reporting on some like newer, deadlier, more addictive form of drugs that are about to hit the market.
Yeah, a heroin that you don't have to inject. You can just put it on your skin, which
it's kind of like fentanyl patches now. Yeah.
Put it on a dollar bill and get cops.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said, like just sort of like the weird like time compression about these movies and when they came out. And like, you know, this came out in 1998 and like, you know, DMX's career, it's just this whole end of the millennium, like dawn of the 21st century. Like there's a real like kind of like existential like horror infused in this movie about the approaching millennium and about like, you know, some apocalyptic event that's like on the horizon. And I'm not saying the movie like predicted 9/11 or anything or how fucked up the 21st century has gotten, but it definitely like it felt where we were all heading, which is that like, you know, like I think it really communicates like the nihilism of the times we live in now, and like we're sort of anticipating that and seeing like, you know, just like a youth culture that had become mainstream culture that was just thoroughly suffused in like sex, drugs, and violence, and like and completely bereft of like any kind of like morality or tether to our human beings at all. And like there's this real sense that like, you know, some violent break is coming in the future, that like this new millennium augurs very like, you know, ominous things. Like, and I just really like when I recently watched the movie, like that was what I was most struck by, is like, you know, like the Times Square New Year's Eve last shot of the movie. Like it feels so thoroughly apocalyptic to me watching this movie again now, and it's well into the 21st century.
And yeah, because there is like, even though it ends on and I'm like sort of air quoting this, like hopeful note, because you really don't know like what's going to happen. I mean, you feel like Sincere's probably going to be okay. Buns, you don't know about. Buns pretty much put himself in danger by not following through with killing the minister, but it still gives you this like hope that maybe things are going to be okay for the two of them, like even no matter how small of a hope that is. But up until that point in this movie, it is pretty much like a bleak, hopeless, desolate life for everyone involved in this movie. Like, because the thing is, they're not like, it's not like they become like this criminal empire, you know, like they go to Omaha, start selling heroin, Rico turns them in right away, and it like fucks their entire operation up. Yeah, we'll get to it. I cannot wait to talk Rico.
There's no real rise and fall in this movie, or like really like not in the same sense of like traditional gangster movies. It's like they're pretty much kind of always operating at the same frequency, which is like, you know, they have the same hookups. There's, you know, of course, the Jamaican drug lord. We can talk about every scene in Jamaica in this movie is so fucking good. I love all of the stuff in Kingston in this movie. But yeah, like you just meet these like weird characters, and they just sort of come in and out of DMX and Nas's life. But like with that, there's no, like I said, like the plot doesn't go anywhere, and it's like it was so frustrating the first time you watch the movie. But like I think it was like, you know, not an accident in the creation of this movie.
Well, and it does do a good job. I agree with you on the Kingston scenes, by the way. Like I love, as one of my notes here was how much I love how everything there looks, because one of the things I like is it's supposed to make, you know, Jamaica very famously was one of those places that like Americans thought was just like Chappelle's impression of Mr. Nice Guy or whatever in Half Baked. Like that's what like a lot of Americans assumed Jamaica was like. But there's a lot of strife in Jamaica, and it's not the fault of Jamaicans. It's, you know, it's outside forces that have made Jamaica have a lot of, you know, there's a lot of crime, but it doesn't sugarcoat that, but it still makes Jamaica look like this incredibly beautiful place that it is. And I was really struck by how well it pulled those scenes together when you're going through Jamaica with Lennox, who's, you know, they're in the middle of like, so, you know, some really rundown areas in Jamaica that have just been, you know, through outside forces run into the ground. And yet everything there is still so beautiful looking, and there's still such a humanity to it that I really love those bits.
I truly love the character of Lennox. I really love the performance too. And another thing that was so impressive to me about the performance in the movie is that like I understand about, if I'm being generous, a quarter of what Lexington says. Like his accent is like his accent like is so thick that like it's like it's like you know he's speaking English, but it's like like listening to someone from Glasgow speak English to you, and you're like, I got like I heard like maybe a verb in there, but like everything else is just might as well be a different fucking language.
Oh, he's tough. I last night watching it, I thought about turning subtitles on in case there was anything that I like wanted to put in my notes, but I think I've seen it enough that I mostly get what he's saying, at least the gist of it, if I don't 100% understand it. But yeah, that's that's Louis Rankin, who was a Jamaican dance hall guy. And he died a few years ago in a car accident, actually. But great casting choice too. And like Lennox as a character is very outside the box too. For like, in a movie like this with this sort of plot where like they would go to like, well, here's our big connection. It would definitely not be like an old Jamaican guy who, because again, there's this whole idea in like American films that like, Jamaicans are like, all they do is smoke weed and they're all like chill and happy. And I think, and I just like that outside the box sort of casting choice that they did, using him as the baddest person that they know. And you really don't see him do anything. There's the two parts. So the part is when Buns is visiting him about helping him out with this new heroin, and he's kind of having second thoughts, and he says, "Are you scared?" And just he doesn't raise his voice, but he's just basically like, "You don't come into my house and bring that mess with you. You don't come in here and say that I'm scared. I'm not scared of anything." And it's like very, very quickly he turns a switch. And then of course the scene where the assassins come and he takes out 30 people.
And then he's just like chilling, watching soccer, smoking blunt. And then like as soon as he realizes what's going on, he just like goes under the couch cushions and pulls out a gold-plated AK-47. Oh, so cool.
He almost makes it too if it weren't for that. And that's another example of incredible style in this movie, that assassin.
Well, they choose to have him assassinated by some like fucking like Jamaican dominatrix who just like has like just sort of like turbo goth like heels and spikes everywhere, and then she just like drops down and slits his throat. Like again, it's out of nowhere. It's completely out of left field, and it's never really explained either. That's another thing I really like about this movie, is that it's like it doesn't spell out, like it doesn't allow easy access for the viewer.
No, not at all. And because I mean, you see that woman who comes in the scene where they find out that Lennox had Sosa killed. I also like the scene when Sosa gets killed, when DMX is dressed as like a Jamaican like windshield washer,
squeegee man or something.
Yeah, squeegee man, and comes up and just puts one in him with that girl in the car. But when they explain that, they're like, he's gonna die, and they just kind of show that girl sitting there, and then the next thing you know, she's up with all these dudes with like laser mounted rifles, and it's just kind of stalking through the house while he takes them out to get her opportunity. And she leaps off of a fucking balcony to do it. Like, it's a really awesome scene. And it's one that is definitely like hyper realistic, that like, like I said, she leaps off of a balcony when she comes down on top of him to slit his throat. But I don't give a shit. It's so stylistically cool that I just go along with it every time. But yeah, I like too that they sort of juxtapose the differences between Bun's life at home and Sincere's life at home, where Buns is out fucking around with 16-year-old girls and pissing off his girlfriend, and and then you get Sincere, who is like a family man, and the color use there, where Bun's home is this like deep blue and Sincere's home is this
it's very homey,
red.
It's very warm.
Yeah, it's really neat how, and you never know. I like that they don't have another cliche in these movies, is where the two friends have this thing that just wedges between them, and that's where the main conflict comes at the end. But this really never goes that route. Like Buns and Sincere, even though it's not as strong as it was at the beginning of the movie, at no point in this movie is there like a point where they aren't boys. Like, yeah, it's a movie about dudes. But yeah, and Lennox too. Lennox is another one. When he's in that car, he's just got a fucking spliff the size of a infant's forearm in the movie. Like, and again, absolutely 100% real. When everything goes to shit and Rico turns them in. Let's talk Rico here for a minute. Rico is another
baffling, bizarre character that seems like he's from a totally different movie and universe that is just so that works still so perfectly, and it's just so quintessentially bizarre and funny. But like I don't know how else to describe it. Just him eating that banana and his insane perm, and the whole scene in the strip club with Method Man. Oh, just it's pure cinema.
It took me a very long time to realize that was Tyrone Turner from Menace to Society playing Rico.
Yeah.
Like, he looks complete, and I love when that first introduction to him, and again, for whatever reason, his scene is another one of those ones that's completely awash in blue. when you see him in the movie, the first introduction to him. And like you said, he's eating that banana and he's like disgustingly eating that banana, like mouth chewing.
Yeah.
But he sees them drive by and he's like, I don't like that shit. I don't
so
like
we're gonna
that
have to
shit.
drop a dime.
Which again makes him an instantly unlikable character, that he would be such a piece of shit that he would roll on his competition like that, like to the cops. Like that's low-handed. You don't fucking do that. Handle it in any other way. But going to the cops to get them arrested is fucked. Everything goes to shit. They hire Shamik, and I always forget that Method Man doesn't show up until like it's like fucking 50 minutes into this movie.
It's like at least an hour into the movie. Yeah,
but I love the scenes with him and Rico too, where he's trying to. It's like a guy who's
sort of trying to ingratiate himself to Rico by coming on as this sort of clownish, over the top buffoon. But he's only doing that to like disarm him so that he can get the drop on him, essentially.
Well, Rico describes him as a silly motherfucker, and I feel like that's accurate. Like his first meeting with him. But the thing is, he does not get the drop on him because Rico, for all of his problems, is a pretty slick motherfucker.
Yeah, he's pretty smart.
Yeah, he knows.
You think he's a fucking clown, but like he's actually a pretty dangerous person himself. I mean, that's not because like everyone in this movie is like pretty dangerous and frightening too. Like,
yeah, there's other than maybe Sincere seems like the one who only acts if his life is in danger, but everybody else in this movie is somebody who could like
totally volatile. Know what I mean? They're all Tommy from Goodfellas in this movie. Everyone in this movie is Tommy.
Oh, another use of song in this that I didn't mention, I kind of glossed over when we were talking about the scene where the Jamaicans learn that Lennox killed Sosa. I love, and it's another song that's not on this soundtrack, is Sister Nancy's Bomb Bomb, which has been in fucking, a million things. I found out something last night. She has never gotten paid, or not, she up until about 10 years ago, she never got paid a dime for that song. All the times that it's been sampled, she never made a dime off of it because she had, like, through this fucked up thing, lost the rights to that song. And it wasn't until fucking Coca-Cola used it in a commercial that she was like, okay, this is not right. And like,
tale as old as time in the music business. I'm like, fucking Kate Bush is out here making $250,000 a day because of Stranger Things. I mean, it just goes to show it pays to own your masters.
Yeah, and she did get, but she wasn't allowed to be paid back on anything that had used it before. But basically, for the last like 8 years or so, she's gotten paid anytime it's been sampled, and she now owns 50% of her song. So that's good.
That's good.
Yeah. I mean, even when Kanye used it, like, and it kind of sucks because it's like a bunch of people who were, they had the money to do something if they wanted to help take care of her, and none of them did. So but like you said, it's a tale as old as time in the music industry. Somebody pointed something out on Twitter to me that I had never noticed before watching the movie last night. But when any character in this movie is being introspective, they're wearing glasses.
That's a very good point. Because like when Buns goes into his sort of like kind of like Louis Farrakhan inspired, like, knowledge of self period where he starts dressing, he starts dressing in suits, and he's wearing glasses like that. That's when Buns becomes sort of saved in a way. He starts through glasses, and that's when he starts reading books. I mean, maybe he just never got a vision test, and he was like all this knowledge of self was available to him, but he was like, nah, like I don't like these books. I can't see anything. And then someone just gave him glasses, and he was like, oh, okay, interesting. I'll check this out.
Yeah, I like the line of this too, where he says, Shorty can't eat a book when he's talking about Sincere's talking to him about if he's ever read, and he's just basically like, no, I care about making money.
Yeah.
Just a funny line. But yeah, and like, you don't exactly know. Again, the way this movie plays out. So they meet Lennox, start selling heroin, they get fucked over. He heads to, I forget where, Atlanta is where Buns ends up. Buns ends up in Atlanta. Sincere ends up in Jersey. They split up to kind of get the heat off of him. Buns is selling weed, which is a really fun, like, I don't know, you can't make a lot of money selling weed. It's just like a funny thing that he fell back on selling weed of all things to kind of get through all of this. But I love the scene in the restaurant where the kid kills Wise in that fancy restaurant,
and then as he's getting arrested, like he's cuffed behind his back, he still has a lit blunt just like dangling out of the corner of his mouth. He's still smoking it, like as they put him in the fucking squad car. and then when he's in prison, he's smoking weed in prison too. I remember like that blew my mind when I first saw this movie. I was like, wait a second, they let you get high in jail? They let you openly smoke weed in jail? That doesn't make sense.
So he gets released from jail. And like I said, this is where the movie really becomes something special, because up to this point, even though, like you said, it's kind of hard to describe that first hour because it is both not standard plot stuff and fairly standard plot stuff. Like, they don't have the rise and fall, but like even when they're having their rise, there's parts where like Buns is basically like becoming the one who's a little mad with power, and even though it never drives a wedge between him and Sincere completely, there's parts where he's you can tell that Sincere's getting annoyed and kind of seeing his friend change into this I want to be a crime lord sort of character. And it never fully goes there. They get fucked over. He goes to jail and then he gets out. And like I said, this is like we talked about earlier. This is where it really becomes something special, because Buns is playing basketball and this shadowy figure approaches him and basically says, they don't come out and say that he's CIA, but or a Fed of some sort, but he hires Buns to kill this minister who is a stand-in for Louis Farrakhan. And that is what the final act of this movie is about. And the conflict there is, does Tommy do it? Does Buns go through with it? Sincere's whole, and you know what? This movie could have got another, when Sincere's talking about going to Africa, that's what I like about this movie. It zigs when it should zag in the final act, especially because in most movies with this plot, Sincere would want to be leaving and he would get killed the day before he's supposed to leave town or something. You know what I mean? Like, that's how these
day before my African retirement.
He would get killed. And he doesn't. He gets shot in the leg by Black and he kills 2 people and he has to like flee to Africa, but he doesn't die. Shameik and them show up. And I like oh my God, I love the scene when Shameik shows up at Bun's house and Keisha just fucking wrecks him. Like, I mean, he gets a few good shots in on her and she just absolutely becomes an uncaged beast and just like beats his face with a fucking ashtray and like without question plugs him in the face. Like, she doesn't think twice about doing so.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then it plays out where, Tommy or Buns approaches the minister who tells him like, I knew you were going to come to kill me. Let me talk to you before you do. And it gives both characters this sort of redemption because, like I said, Sincere will be just fine. Like, Sincere's in Africa. Got to assume that he's escaped that life. Tommy has put himself in a bit of danger because he just fucked over the feds. So what happens to him remains a bit of a, however you want to paint that picture and you can. But it does give this somewhat hopeful glimpse into what's going to happen to both characters at the same time, while you said giving this sort of apocalyptic view of Times Square on New Year's Eve on 1999, which is, at the time there was so much uncertainty anyways with that particular New Year's Eve that it's
Y2K.
It's not exactly.
And I love like the very last shot of the movie is, like it's Times Square, New Year's Eve, 1999. And it's just like all the confetti, all like these blaring lights. And like, then you have Nas's voiceover where he's just saying like, Africa, just what a country. Can't believe how amazing it is. It's like a whole different world. I wish you could see it. And it's so funny because it's like, maybe like if they had not run out of money, you would have seen Sincere in Africa. But I just love that he's talking about how amazing Africa is and it's never shown. It's just like, it's only in voiceover. But like, again, like the jarring contrast of him talking about how beautiful and real Africa is as a country and like him going there and experiencing it, contrasted with, like I said, like this like nightmarish like neon underworld of like Times Square at the Millennium is, like I said, where I get this very apocalyptic feeling from the movie.
Well, and for whatever reason in my head last night, I was certain that it ends with Sincere, like I thought there was a shot of him in Africa, like with Tion walking up behind him and like giving him by the way, T-Boz is really good in this movie. And a movie full of people that aren't great actresses or actors and actresses, like she's another highlight as far as like untested actors go. But it's not there. I forgot that it just ends with the shot of Times Square. And an interesting choice with this too, because this came out in 98. Surely it was being filmed in like mid to late 1997, maybe into early 1998. But the choice to set it leading into the new millennium is another interesting one that I think you hit the nail on the head, that it's sort of a foreboding message that it leads directly into the year 2000 with the smallest glimmer of maybe everything's going to be okay, but deep down after seeing a movie
and it's like, I guess like I just interpret it as like, like the world that like Sincere and Buns inhabited and created for themselves was really like, I think the sort of prophecy of the movie is that like the seduction of evil that like that they have been taken in by, and like the power that comes with money, or the devil's pie, like on the D'Angelo song on the soundtrack, is like, like I think supping from that cup as deeply as they have. Like, I think like the millennium, the century that we're in now, is like really in one in which like created by men like Sincere and Buns before they had any kind of grace or redemption. Is that like, yeah, this is a world of just pure of money, and like, like if you're a winner, you have like, all the sick shit. You've got like the fucking the Range Rover, you've got all the nicest clothes, but it is a world just like entirely built on just like the predation and exploitation of your fellow man. And like that pure nihilism, I think, is sort of like what the movie is pointing to about like at the dawn of this new millennium.
Yeah, and I had forgotten again until going into it last night that the whole thing takes place in 99 leading up to the new millennium. So that's an interesting like lens to view it through, because again, I think you're whether it was Hype Williams' intention, pure intention or not, that is sort of how it comes through. And yeah, it's just a really well done. Yeah, and I like that ending. I actually kind of like that you don't see Sincere in Africa.
No, it works beautifully. Like I said, that would be kind of corny if you saw him in Africa, but the fact that you don't, it leaves this kind of haunting ambiguity about everything.
And I have to assume that the reason there wasn't that shot in Africa, well, I mean, I guess they could have like used a placeholder for Africa without having to go to Africa, but they probably had no budget to do like a 1 day shoot in Africa to get a 5-second bit at the end where he's like, standing with his wife and kid in Africa somewhere. So if it was intentional, great. If it wasn't, it worked out. It was one of those happy accident sort of things that it worked out the way that it did. All right. Well, that's Belly. Okay, so let's talk about the soundtrack. So most of the songs on this were soundtrack originals. If I note otherwise, that means they weren't, but pretty much everything on here, which actually, again, talking about how my timing was all fucked up, surprised me quite a bit going through this, that I was certain that there were going to be more of these that were plucked from prior albums. So the soundtrack released November 3rd, 1998. It debuted and peaked at number 5 on the Billboard 200. So it was pretty successful. It's certified gold. The top 10 the week that it was released were, number 1 was Alanis Morissette's supposed former infatuation junkie. Now, I will say, I'm just happy that it's that, not Jagged Little Pill, because at least 1/3 of the lists that I've done have had Jagged Little Pill on them. And it's nothing against Jagged Little Pill. Just Jesus Christ. That album. I remember when this album came out, one of my really good friends from high school, like huge Alanis Morissette fan, like went to the midnight releasing of that at the local record store in college. We went to college together to get supposed former infatuation junkie. It's like one of those, it's like my only real memory of this album was Rob going to pick this album up at the midnight release because he was so excited for it. Number 2 was the U2's The Best of 1980 through 1990. Number 3 was Jay-Z's Volume 2 Hard Knock Life. Number 4 was Celine Dion's These Are Special Times. Number 5 was the Belly soundtrack. Number 6 was the self-titled NSYNC album. Number 7 was Mia X's Mama Drama, which I didn't realize Mia X was big enough on No Limit that she was a top 10 artist at one time. Good for her. She's like one of the names that I really remember from the No Limit days. Number 8 was Drew Hill's Enter the Drew. Number 9 was Shania Twain's Coming Over. And number 10 was Lauryn Hill's The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, which I've been listening to a lot lately, like coincidentally prior to even doing this.
That was a huge album. What won like 15 Grammys or something like that?
Yeah, still holds up real well. Goddamn. So the further down the chart, top 10, these are albums in the top 200 that never cracked the top 10. There's a really fucking surprising one in here. So number 13 was Beck's Mutations, which is where it peaked. It peaked at number 13. Number 20 was Goo Goo Dolls' Dizzy Up the Girl, which is the album that had Iris, Black Balloon, Broadway. That album never made the Billboard top 10. It only peaked at number 15, which is like shocking to me because, like, you're my age. Those songs were fucking inescapable. Like, all of those songs were humongous. And the fact that they had like 6 huge singles and that album never made the Billboard top 10 is like, I don't know. It's like,
I don't want the world to see me. Well, the Billboard charts, that's no problem. They're missing you entirely, Mr. Goo Goo.
And at number 55 was the Insane Clown Posse's Great Melenka, which peaked at number 63. So number 1 on this soundtrack is Ladies No Way In, No Way Out. So this one was written by R. Kelly, as is one other on this. And there's a few of these. This is a soundtrack that has a handful of these where their lady practically doesn't exist outside of this soundtrack. Like,
no, yeah.
This song, and she has one other credit, and it was for vocals on a 54th Regiment album from 2002. I don't know 54th Regiment. I just found that on Discogs, but this song later got sampled on Redman's I'll Be That. But this is like something I discussed on Deep Cover a few weeks ago, and that's that this song. So in Deep Cover leads off with the track Deep Cover, which sets this sort of unrealistic tone for what the rest of the album is like, because while Deep Cover is a good soundtrack, the rest of it's like New Jack Swing R&B stuff, save for like 2 other songs that sort of fit in the like gangster rap sort of mold that Deep Cover has. So this one starts off with this R&B track, which there's a few of them, but they're all sort of front loaded on this. And the rest of it is nothing like this. But I'm glad that it's on here because this is some good 90s R&B. And honestly, this was like a throwback even at the time. Like this reminds me of the like 94 through 96 R&B, which had sort of started to go out of fashion by then, but for a track in 98. But yeah, I like her voice. I like the choral stuff. I like this track.
It's sort of, sort of dreamy and soulful, but yeah, it's just a matter of like, who the fuck is Lady? Like, like, I don't know how you feel about this. Like, you could kind of disagree with me if you want, but like in re-listening to this soundtrack, like considering it's like, it's an all-star team of like 90s New York City rap. I gotta say though, like a lot of the songs that were made for the soundtrack do seem to be like kind of like filler for me. Like, I think there are 3 or 4 like really great songs on this soundtrack, but most of it, in my opinion, is kind of forgettable.
That's fair. I hadn't listened to this soundtrack in quite a while before we did this, and I like it certainly more than you're describing it right now, but I do not think it's like an essential soundtrack. Like, I don't think it's definitely not one that got my essential rating. But I think that I don't 100% disagree with what you're saying there. Like, I could absolutely see that viewpoint with this. I just think that I may be a little warmer to it than you are, but no, I don't think that's like you should see if you look at this Wikipedia for this soundtrack and you look at the personnel involved, it literally was like 80 people involved in like production and writing. And like, this was, like you said, an all-star team. And there are a few songs on here that are middling at best. Like,
but there's a handful that are really great though, including some of the songs that were original to the movie.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
And we can get into it, but yeah, as we go through it. But
I guess that leads us up to number 2, D'Angelo's Devil's Pie. Now, this
song is so fucking good. I mean, this is a great song. I mean, actually, you know what? I'm looking through my notes on this, and like, I mean, maybe this is just speaking to my biases, but like all of the songs that are my favorite on this soundtrack are produced by DJ Premier, and Devil's Pie, no exception. Such a great song. It's so cinematic, and I remember the exact moment in the movie when like this they play this song. It's when they're like packing up bricks and cellophane to fucking traffic them to Omaha, and they're talking on the phone in the kitchen. And yeah, Devil's Pie. This is in my opinion one of, if not the best songs on the soundtrack.
Oh, I don't disagree with you at all. I loved it. Look, when Black Messiah came out, I've been a long time D'Angelo fan. Like, I love Brown Sugar. I remember buying that in school with friends who didn't really listen to shit like that, and then being like, what is this? But I love that album. When Black Messiah came out, I bought it at midnight and stayed up. I listened to it like 4 times in a row before I went to bed and went to work the next day just fucking exhausted. Like, I love D'Angelo. Now, one thing this is one of those ones that fucked me up timeline wise. I thought Voodoo was before this soundtrack, but Voodoo wasn't until like 2000. It was like a year and a half after this came out. So this was a soundtrack original. This wasn't on Voodoo until a year and a half later when that album came out. But this one actually uses quite a few samples too, and I like that they're very unobtrusive. It rides on 2, like the whole entire beat rides on 2, and that's Michel Colombier, who I talked about in Deep Cover. He's a great film composer. Has a song called Jericho Jerk, and Teddy Pendergrass's And If I Had are the 2 main samples that this sort of melds into one. And then it's like a bunch of vocal snippets, like it samples from Raekwon's Wu Gambino and Beating Us Off the Books, but that's like where it splices in vocal samples. But this is a song that's been sampled multiple times since it came out. But I really hope we get another D'Angelo album in the near future because he's so good. And I don't disagree with you. I think that this song sounds as good in 2022 as it did in 98 when this came out, or as it did in 2000 when Voodoo came out, depending on when you first heard it. And, if you haven't heard it, like, if somehow you've not heard Devil's Pie, like, stop this show right now and listen to it before you come back and listen to the rest of this episode, because it's incredible.
And like I said, it sounds so cinematic, the song, and it works so well, like in the scene where they're trafficking drugs, like Devil's Pie, cutting up pies. I mean, it's quite literal, but it works brilliantly. It's an amazing song.
And I feel like a lot of movies would have had a sequence, like that sequence where, like you said, I feel like the music choice would have been different. This almost feels like one that, like, if you saw that scene and heard this song separately, you might think these two don't work together. But when you see them in the film combined together, it's perfect. It's like, I agree with you that it's cinematic, but I feel like it would have been in like a different sequence than the scene that it was used in. But magically it works so well in that bit of the movie. So number 3, we've got DMX, Method Man, Nas, and Ja Rule's grand finale. So I'll do a little more talk about Ja Rule when we get to his track. But And he really doesn't show up much on here. He basically does the chorus. But the big sample on this one is NWA's Prelude. Okay, the beat on this song is fucking ridiculous. Like, I love how they use that sample in this.
Yeah, this is like sort of the classic '90s like all-star track where you got DMX, fucking Method Man, and Nas on a track. I mean, that's like the Murderers Row right there. That's like the fucking 1930s Yankees stepping up to the plate.
Well, and they come out like everyone plays to their own strengths. Like Method Man dropping lines like "Nobody's safe" from Friday the 13th, Ghetto Jason, like referencing like an 80s horror movie, and that's 2 lines into the fucking song. Nas does like a little short story in his verse. DMX is at his most menacing. He has some great one-liners. Yeah, this song's incredible, and this was the first single on the album, and it's easy to see why. This was like such an obvious choice for the first single from the soundtrack. Number 4 is Jerome's "Never Dreamed You'd Leave in the Summer," which is a cover of a Stevie Wonder song. Jerome was on Bad Boy, but aside from this song, he's only released 2 basically unheard singles. And this is one that I would agree with you. Like, I would skip by this one if I were listening to it. Like, it's a fine cover, I guess, but it's not terribly different from the original, but not quite different enough to be its own thing, like.
And yeah, like this is like, like the featuring of like, the currently residing in the "Where Are They Now" category of like 90s R&B singers. It's like, yeah, Jerome. Yeah. People are still talking about Jerome and his cover of Stevie Wonder's "Never Dreamed You'd Leave in Summer."
Well, you know what this reminds me of? Honestly, one of my notes here is it reminds me of if somebody ran Stevie Wonder's version of this song through the song "Hero" by Mariah Carey. Like the production reminds it's like that sort of like, especially when it gets really bombastic in the final 30 seconds or so. But like, yeah, I mean, my opinion on this one is that it's fine. Like, it's not one that I'm going to rush to listen to. And like, certainly, as I got through more listens subsequently leading to this episode recording, it was one that I skipped by because I was like, I feel like I know all I need to know about this song and what I want to say about this song after like 2 listens. Number 5 is Sparkle's "What About?", which is from her self-titled album. So R. Kelly wrote this one too. I talked about Sparkle recently on a show. I forget, maybe Godzilla, because her album was in the top 10, but she was
I do not remember Sparkle in the slightest.
She had one big hit. "Be Careful" was the name of the song. It's actually a really fucking cool song. She had her career hampered by R. Kelly. R. Kelly, she was one of his proteges. She took the case against him in 2008, and one of the ones that he beat because she found a video of him doing sexual acts with her 14-year-old daughter that he recorded.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So, I feel like
the first line of this song is "Think about the children."
Yeah, like it is. R. Kelly. I mean, who knows what Sparkle might have gone on to do had she not been wrapped up with R. Kelly? Because it feels like most likely, and I don't know this, I can't say this for certain, but I would feel like most likely what spoiled her from the music industry was R. fucking Kelly.
Yeah.
She had a good voice, and like I said, "Be Careful" is a pretty good song. Check out "Be Careful" after this. It's a really good song. You might even remember it if you heard it because it was a fairly big hit. Her debut album cracked the top 10. Like, it was a big enough hit that happened. But yeah, it sounds like R. Kelly drove out of music. But as far as this song goes, I like this one. I like her voice. I think this is a really good, another one of the like front-loaded R&B tracks on here. Number 6 is Hottie Toddy's "Two Sides." So this is funny because Hottie Toddy was rapping under a pseudonym. Hottie Toddy's actually Vita. And in this movie, she's the one who plays Kiana, DMX's side chick, the like young girl.
Oh, right.
Yeah. Which is why.
No, and there's a couple, because I mean, Raekwon is on this album as Corey Woods, not as Raekwon.
Yeah.
So I mean, it must have been some like label, like all the different artists and all their labels or whatever, assembling them for the soundtrack. I'm sure there was some rights issues about like using their names or something like that.
It had to have been. And the thing about Vita is,
and she did the chorus on Mobb Deep's "Burn," right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
She's done. She was on Lap Dance with Nerd. She was on Put It On Me by Ja Rule. Like, she's been on a whole bunch of shit. So she was actually included. Vita was actually included on Billboard's list of 31 female rappers who changed hip hop. But the problem is she's only had one release, and it was a mixtape. The mixtape was called Pre-Cum, which is like the fucking funniest thing. I love. I love that was the name of it. But this one was done. The production on this song was done by Dame Grease, who did production on The Lox before he met DMX. And Dame Grease, who did the production on this song, was largely responsible for the production on DMX's "It's Dark and Hell Is Hot" and "Flesh of My Flesh, Blood of My Blood." And I mention this because you can hear that influence on the production on this song. Like, this is a really great beat. And, Toddy or Vita, whatever you want to call her, she rips it up. I like that this is a song that's unapologetically about being a side piece, but it's like in an empowering way. Like, it reminds me of like a Gangsta Boo track or something. So I like this one though.
So yeah, I guess my overall take on Two Sides is that I do like Vita. I was not aware that she was using a pseudonym in this song, but I think the song it's not bad, but it's not great either.
And that's, I mean, I think that's a fair assessment. Like I said, I think as I've gotten older, I've become significantly more of like a production side nerd. Like that's like my like main focus when I listen to rap anymore is like how good the production sounds. And I've always liked the production on stuff, but like I think that the production, and she's a great rapper, but I think the production outpaces her a little bit on this track. So I could absolutely see maybe feeling that way about this one. So at number 7, we've got Maya. What did you say Raekwon went by on this?
He was going by I think his real name, which is Corey Woods.
Okay, so Maya with Corey Woods, aka Raekwon, and Noriega, Moving Out. Which is, and this is actually a remix of her track Moving On, which was from her debut album, but still original to this soundtrack because the remix is very different. This one samples Gary Wright's Love is Alive and Rose Royce's Wishing on a Star. So, at first blush, Maya with Raekwon and Noriega sounds like a weird mix, but it works fine here.
I mean, Raekwon and Nori on the same track. Yes, please.
Yeah, I think Maya was the one that threw me off because I kind of forgot about Maya. Like she was a big deal for like a minute there. And I was
Ghetto
looking
superstar.
like, yeah. And she has not released a whole lot in the last like 10 years. Like I don't know what happened, but I do think that Noriega and Raekwon work a little bit more on this track because that beat definitely plays to their strengths. Like I like this one though.
Yeah, I enjoyed the song a lot.
All right, so number 8, we've got DMX with Sean Paul and Mr. Vegas, Top Shotter. So Mr. Vegas is another Jamaican dancehall guy. The first time I listened to this for this show, my first thought was, well, this one really dates exactly when this was made with Sean Paul on here. But again, this is another one where I was wrong because Sean Paul didn't have his really big success until like 3 years after this. Like this was way ahead of Sean Paul. Because there was, a time in like, 2001, 2002 where Sean Paul
was everywhere.
Yeah. And now here's the thing. I've never really been a big Sean Paul guy. Like I was never a big fan of Sean Paul's shit.
No, me neither.
Yeah. But X is great here.
The only note I have for this song in my notes is DMX's line, "Rip your butthole out of place." So.
I have that in my notes too. Like, look, peak DMX is untouchable because only he could get away with a line like, "I stomp a butthole in your face, motherfucker. Rip your butthole out of place." Like, and he follows it with a line, "Cock the Glock to your head, let off about 2 in it. Yeah, it's a dirty job, but I just love doing it." So I feel like that helps because that's a pretty great line. But yeah, I mean, Sean Paul works fine here. I like Top Shotter a lot, actually. Top Shotter is one of the ones I really like on here. So up next, we've got Ja Rule's Story to Tell. Now, this is another one too. I know I keep saying this, but this is one I didn't realize that this was before Ja Rule had even released his first album. Like this was like a year before. I forget what his first album was called. But anyway, a year before that first came out. And this one samples EFG's UFO, which is an oft-sampled song. Like it's been sampled by Dilla, Biggie, Big Daddy Kane, Q-Tip, Tupac, MF Doom. The list goes on and on. It's on Return of the Mac even. He has a very famously sampled song. But I think something that's long been forgotten about Ja Rule, even by me up until I listened to this again, is that before, everything that he's done in the last 20 years, he was really good. Wangsta was basically the beginning of the end for him. And it's funny because that song wasn't even about Ja Rule. Just when they asked 50 Cent whether it was about him, he was like, no, but he's a Wangsta too. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
But he didn't do himself any favors, obviously, with shit like Mesmerize and everything that he kind of followed with. But it's kind of crazy how the whole very promising rapper era of his career is completely forgotten. Because look, there are people who still talk about how Jay Leno was at one time a very good stand-up comedian. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Ja doesn't get that treatment, but
no, because 50 Cent ended his career so thoroughly, demolished him. Whether it was justified or not, who can say? I won't be the judge of that. I will say though, on this song, Ja Rule is also not doing himself any favors by he's doing the music version of violating the Mystery Science Theater 3000 rule, which is don't remind me of a better song in the title of your song. If you're going to do a song that's the same title essentially as a song that Biggie already did, you got to be coming with something that's a little bit more impressive than what Ja Rule's coming out with.
That's fair. And again, like I said, I kind of tried to just distance myself from how I feel about Ja Rule and well, pretty much since I think the real killing point for me with him was Mesmerize. Like that song. Do you remember that one where he's like, it's him and Ashanti and he's like singing on it, but
Yeah.
it's Cookie Monster singing. Like it's just
Yeah.
so bad.
Yeah.
But you know, I do like, and again, production wise, that menacing piano that it's over. And you know, I feel like in some alternate universe, maybe this is the career path Ja Rule followed, and here we are stuck with Firefest as his ultimate legacy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was cool going back and trying to look at this through like the lens of like forget everything you know about Ja Rule in 2022 and look at this one as like a soundtrack song if I were hearing it for the first time in 98. But number 10, we've got Jay-Z featuring Memphis Bleak and Beanie Siegel. The song's Crew Love. It samples Mark Lindsay's Arizona, which is a fucking great 70s song and a really weird choice for a sample on this. One of my first notes is that Memphis Bleak sounds like a literal child on this song. Like he sounds like a kid.
Well, this is great because his first line is, "Yeah, I smoke weed now. I don't give a fuck." No, it's the guy from the park bench in the movie.
Right. I wasn't sure. I was like, did they have like a cameo here? But it just shocked me how young he sounded here. But again, this is another one. I love the beat on this one.
Yeah, this is a classic, like, you know, this is just classic like 90s posse cut, like Rockefeller Records, and like also, you know, like you know, Jay-Z is obviously like, you know, he's had like a way longer and more storied career, but like Memphis Bleak and Beanie Siegel were fucking great. Like, and you know, I love that era of Rockefeller Records rather more so than what Jay-Z's become now. But yeah, this is a classic 90s Rockefeller song, so I like this one a lot.
Well, I think Beanie steals the show on this one.
Oh yeah, definitely.
All right, so at number 11, we've got Noriega and Maze, not Mace, Maze with a Z. Sometimes I actually had to look and make sure that this wasn't one of those situations where it was like Mace rapping under another, because I mean, you know, that would make sense with some of the people involved here. But Maze's only other appearance was on a track with Big Pun, so he's not somebody who's, you know, another one of those who's kind of like
he's sort of one of these guys that was like a friend of a friend who was featured on a couple songs, you know, on iconic albums. But you know, like. That's a little, you know, like I think that's cool.
Oh, I mean, that's a soundtrack thing that I've run into so much with this is like, yeah, like I has to be like friend of a friend who it's like, we'll put you on here. What the hell? The sample on this one is Billy Preston's One More Time for Love. Look, I know I'm sounding like a broken record right now, but the production on this soundtrack is just immaculate all the way through. And this one's no exception. And this is actually, you know, this one doesn't have a lot of introspective rap tracks on it, but this is one of them, you know, like
I like any song where Noriega is sort of like being sensitive and he likes talking about his dead dad. I mean, remember like on the Capone Noriega album that came out in the 2000s on the DJ Premier produced like single off the album. Noriega has a great line where he was really like the pioneer of repeating the same line, which a lot of rappers do now to great effect. But Noriega, he's like, I'm sorry I fucked up and made a half-ass album. My excuse is my pops just died. I didn't want to make music. My pops just died. So this is a little preview of Nori, sort of like letting the listener into his heartbreak over the death of his father, talking about about how much he loves his dead dad because he was the first person who gave him a gun and taught him how to box. And I love on the chorus, he says, sometimes I want to cry and pray. Sometimes I just want to get drunk all day. So it's like Noriega like has always been one of the funniest rappers to me. Like he always has to me like one of the best senses of humor of any rapper. But like I think that's maybe it's sometimes working at cross purposes with a more heartfelt song like this one because it's still funny to me.
What's the other line from the chorus? Sometimes I got money, but I still feel broke.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I like this one. So number 12, Drag On. We all can get it on. That's a tough one to say. Drag On. We all can get it on. Drag On didn't have an album at the time this released, but put out a handful of albums in the 2000s. Actually, initially he was on Rough Riders, and one's really good. I'll come back to it later on. We'll talk when I do the like further listening things. But Drag On's, you know what Drag On's flow reminds me of in this song? You know, in DMX's albums when he plays the devil and he does that devil rap, like that voice. That's what he sounds like on this.
In my notes, I said Drag On sounds like a combination of Noriega and DMX.
Like, I can see that too.
Like his voice is a little bit like DMX, but like his delivery sounds a lot more like Noriega to me. I don't know. There's something so funny to me because like to me, like Drag On would go on to star. He had a small part in the DMX film Exit Wounds with Steven Seagal. So yeah, I think he was in at least one or two of those Steven Seagal or like DMX Jet Li movies. Yeah, I remember him being sort of like a minor Rough Riders feature or whatever. But basically, all I can think about Drag On is that he has one of the dumbest names in rap history.
Terrible.
And especially in this song when he's like, his name is Drag On, and then like he's doing lyrics about how he's spitting fire and shit. And I'm like,
yeah,
it's not working for me.
And I think one of his albums was even called like Enter the Dragon or something, or Enter the Dragon. But the thing is, then this is one where the production actually is not great on this, but he has some, I like some of his lines. Corpse stiff, hands cold, body temperature, December is a pretty hard line. But yeah, it's just kind of forgettable. Like at the end of the day, this one's very forgettable. Now up next, we've got at 13 Gangstar featuring WC and Rakim, the Militia 2. This is a remix of their song from Moment of Truth. This one samples Hendrix's Stone Free, Jamal's Fatum, and Joe Frazier's Knock on Wood. I love Gangstar. I love everyone.
I mean, like, okay, this is not original to I guess the remix is original to the soundtrack, but like this is probably, you know, this to me is like one of the highlights of the soundtrack. I love Gangstar so much. Like, and this song, the Militia, I mean, I like the original version with Bumpy Knuckles a little bit better, but you've got the West Coast flavor with Dub C, and then you got New York City legend Rakim, obviously on this track. Like to me, Gangstar, DJ Premier, Guru, like they you know, like, and the Premier produced songs on this track on this album. Like to me, DJ Premier just sums up like 90s New York City rap music. Like there's nobody who captured that sound of that time and place better than DJ Premier. Gangstar is one of the greatest groups of all time. Like I absolutely love this song. Unadored Joy. Like this is great. I fucking love this song. I love Gangstar. Nothing more needs to be said.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much like the only thing that I mentioned too is that because I love Dub C. I mentioned him later on too with the further listening thing because one of his 90s albums is like one of my like I just one of those that I associate with like sophomore year of high school basically. But I love his wacky flow. Like he's got such a weird flow and he just he comes in and you said
making a move. Who's that brother? Making a move. I know, and I like it because you know Gangstar is so associated. Gangstar and DJ Premier are so associated with New York City. And like that sound and and Dub C like has a totally different style. He has that West Coast, completely different West Coast delivery. And I like the way it's just seamlessly integrated into this song. I think it works great.
Yeah, it's excellent. All right, up next we've got it's listed as Wu-Tang Clan, although technically this song is just RZA, Ghostface, and Old Dirty Bastard, who only does I love Old Dirty Bastard's part on this. I'm getting ahead of myself. The song's Windpipe. I couldn't find what the sample was on this, but it's a RZA produced track from 1998.
Yeah.
So
okay.
Of course it's awesome.
This is the other, in my opinion, highlight of this album. And then my note for this is probably the most insane Wu-Tang song ever written. And I absolutely love it. And it's got like, and it's the most insane because it's a Wu-Tang song where you can really tell that RZA was like, I'm going to let all the Bobby Digital, I'm really going to shine lyrically on this. And RZA as a rapper is like one of the weirdest rappers. It has some of the fucking some of the most unbelievably weird and hilarious lines in RZA's verse in this song. Like Bobby flipped the metronome, dirty fuck the ogre. Like he says like, what does he say? Pussy so wet you could fuck it with a soft tip dick.
Yeah,
I don't know if Dirt fuck Mariah, but I'm out to fuck Tyra. Starks might fuck Maya. And then Dirty goes, I'm the pussy vampire. And then he says, "Fuck the daughter of the leader of the Ku Klux Klan." It's just this is Wu-Tang at their most insane. And then like and the Old Dirty chorus is just sounds like a guy like the death rattle of a guy on a hospital bed. Dude, I fucking love this track though. This track is crazy. I was obsessed with the song with my friends in high school, college. Like this song was just like, what party can you go to? Like it's just so we're just screaming at each other. Like this is a great song. I love the fucking RZA production, and this is some of like the goofiest RZA lyrics ever.
I love when they lean into that goofiness. You're right. Like the whole bit that Old Dirty says too. It's not just I love the part I'm the pussy vampire, but then they follows it up by saying I don't want to work no more. I want my own island. Like it is so.
It's so good. It's so brilliant. I love this song.
And as always, Ghost is incredible. Yeah, it's fucking great. This was absolutely when I bought this soundtrack. The reason that I bought it
cut. This is the prime because this was like a Wu-Tang song that was not featured on any of their albums. Like this is the only place you could get a brand new Wu-Tang song. And, like I'm sure you probably feel the same way of this era, Wu-Tang probably holds like the nearest and dearest, spot in my heart, because like, they were the first like real like, gangster rap that I got into and listened to, and I was obsessed with them in high school. And yeah, like this song to me, it's still great. I still love it.
Oh yeah, I'm the same as you. Like I was a fucking Wu-Tang obsessive when I was, because I think what 36 Chambers came out was in like 8th grade or something, and
No,
it
just like, yeah, from that first album, you just like, I just like getting into like they were the first rap group that came with their own lore.
Right.
You had to decode like all their slang and fucking like backstories and characters, and it was just such a rich vein. It was like comic books and movies and everything else I loved, and then like in the form of 9 incredibly talented and incredibly distinct and unique talents in the Wu-Tang Clan. So this song to me is the choice cut from the album.
Do you remember that Forever, their 2-disc Forever had,
of course, yeah,
an enhanced, well, no, do you remember that it was an enhanced disc that you could put in the computer, and it, like, you were talking about their lore, and it was like an enhanced disc that you could put in, and it like had a whole bunch of like background information on each person.
I don't remember that. I wish I didn't know that at the time. Fuck.
I do. I had to use it. We had to put it in my one friend that had a computer. We would
Had
like,
a
play it on
CD-ROM. Yeah.
Yes. Yes. All right. So number 15, Sauce Money with Jay-Z's Pregame. Sauce Money's claim to fame was Sauce Money is actually the one who wrote the rap song "I'll Be Missing You" by Puff Daddy, and he released one album in 2000. But he's worked with Big Daddy Kane, Old Dirty Bastard, Shaheem. So he's been around. And this one uses a sample of Quincy Jones's Aftermath, which you can't go wrong with Quincy, because
this is another DJ, this is another primo beat, so
it's
like,
so good.
This song is great. And the Sauce Money line, I mean, like, Sauce Money, I guess he's just like, but I think last time I checked him, he's kind of embittered by like, putting on Jay-Z and then reaping none of the rewards from it.
Yeah.
But he has a great line in this song where he says, "My shells are like information, go in your brain."
I think the line that stuck out to me, because this is, look, Jay-Z, I mean, Jay-Z has a fairly complicated sort of, like, there's no denying Jay-Z early in his career.
Yeah, it's impossible. Like, I mean, if you try to say like, oh, he sucks or is not a good rapper or whatever, like, he's like, he has like 4 or 5 albums that are just absolutely untouchable. So
absolutely,
it's just, I mean, he's become kind of an embarrassment now. But I mean, like, like, as corny as he's gotten now, like, it doesn't dent in any way like the unalloyed greatness of what he was in the 90s.
No, but it is funny in 2022 hearing him say a line like "Your raps is lazy" after knowing his verse in Monster.
Yeah.
All right, so number 16, we've got Made Men with the Locks, Tommy's Theme. This one samples Fat Boy's Breakdown, which is another often sampled track. But Made Men made one album a year after this came out, and they broke up. But one of the guys in this, I don't know if you knew this, is Benzino, the former.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Benzino's in Made Men. Okay, yeah, wow,
yeah.
Famous for using the Source magazine to litigate his vendetta against Eminem.
Yes, yep, that Benzino, he was a member of Made Men. So I like the sample. I think they use the sample real well. Like, the beat's great. I always like the Locks. Made Men. I mean,
yeah, any check the Locks run, I'm into.
Yeah, so this one's fine. It's good.
I love the Lock. Jada Kiss and Cheek Luch and Styles. Like, I mean, it's just like their punchlines are so good. Their delivery is great. I love everything the Locks are on.
Yeah. All right, number 17, we've got Half a Mil with Some. Half a Mil actually was one of those who had a whole lot of potential, but he was murdered in 2003. So he only released 2 albums in his life, one of which is very good. It had appearances from Noriega, Cool G Rap, and Spice One. And anything with Spice One, I'm like, anything made between like 98 and 2000, or 95 and 90, like 2002 with Spice One, I'm all over. So, but this is probably my favorite beat on the whole soundtrack. But the beat on this reminds me of something from Havoc in his Hell on Earth era. Like, it sounds like,
right.
Not Infamous era, but Hell on Earth, when he had sort of like made his production a little more pristine. Half a Mil had a really unique delivery too, though. This is one of my favorites on here. It's just really, really grimy New York City rap, and I'm a huge fan of that. And then at 18, we've got Bravehearts closing out the soundtrack with I Want to Live. Nas's little brother was a member of Bravehearts. They released 2 albums in the early 2000s. This song's fine. No, it's not. It's not that good.
I know it stinks. I mean, like, my notes on this is the Bravehearts era of Nas is next to the acting he did in Belly, the most embarrassing shit that Nas ever did, which is really saying a lot, you know. I mean, like when your fucking crew of like your younger brother and security guards are trying harder on their verses than you are as Nas, like, you know, like that was the Jay-Z diss on him that landed so fucking hard, where he was like, your bodyguard's verse on Uchiwali better than yours. And like, I mean, in a lot of ways, Nas has never recovered from that. But yeah, this is Nas at his absolute laziest, and the Bravehearts were a very embarrassing era in Nas's career.
I think he was just trying to do a favor for his brother, is what I feel like with this. But it
Well,
shows that.
I guess I appreciate I appreciate the instinct, but if not the result.
Yeah, I really hate that this is like, unfortunately, what you're left to remember the soundtrack by when it's all said and done. Like, this is the last thing you hear from this, because it's probably the worst one on here. All right, so that's the soundtrack. So we'll do a quick wrap up here. Songs in the movie that were not on the soundtrack. You've got Soul to Soul's Back to Life acapella, Oludara's House in Motion, Blue Agony, and Sincere. So there's 3 tracks by Oludara. Mr. Easy and Frisco Kid's Bashment Time, not Basement Time, Bashment Time. Mr. Vegas' Sucky Ducky, Frisco Kid's The Right Man, MOP's Blood, Sweat, and Tears, Temple of Souls Technology, Crucial Conflict, Swell Up, which is Crucial Conflict is one of those like largely forgotten 90s rap groups, but hey, is like one of my all-time favorite 90s rap songs. Sister Nancy's Bomb Bomb and DMX's Let Me Fly. Is it on Spotify? Most of it is. It's missing Jerome's Never Dreamed You'd Leave in the Summer and Half a Mill's track.
The Half a Mill song isn't on there either.
Yep. But there's a playlist that somebody made with a bunch of the missing stuff. The problem is the sequencing is pure chaos. Like, nothing's in order. It's like the songs that aren't in the movie front load it, and then some of the so. But you can find short answer, yes, you can find pretty much the whole thing on Spotify, and the other 2 you can track down on YouTube if you needed to. Will, would you say this movie's an essential? Would you say stream it, or would you say skip it?
I would say Belly is an essential watch.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's one of the most like. You know what? Fuck this. I'm going to go. It is a really brave film because Hype Williams had a limited budget and probably not a lot of faith from the studio to do what he wanted to do. And he made what the fuck he wanted to make. And no one liked it when it came out because he was so dedicated to his vision for this movie. And I think that it has aged incredibly well, and I would absolutely call this one an essential. So the soundtrack, essential, stream it, skip it, or cherry pick certain songs off of it.
I would say cherry pick certain songs off of it, or, you know, like stream it, like, especially if you want to like get that feeling of like 90s New York City rap music. But like I said, like my attitude in the soundtrack is that there are like 3 or 4 choice cuts on it, and the rest of it is mostly like, you know, okay, but like kind of forgettable.
I would give it a stream. I would say at the very least, like, there's one skipper in the middle and then one really bad song at the end, but I think everything else is at least checking out once. So I would call it a stream. Do the 2 go well together, the soundtrack and the movie?
Definitely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, the movie's basically a 90-minute music video in some ways. So the music is crucial and it works every time it's used in the movie. So, all right, Will, what's your top 3?
Okay. Top 3 from the soundtrack is Devil's Pie by D'Angelo, Militia by Gangstar, and Windpipe by Wu-Tang.
Okay, mine's Devil's Pie, Gangstar's Militia, and Wu-Tang Clan's Windpipe. So...
Okay, all right, yeah, there we go. So those are your prime cuts.
Yeah, those are my 3. Further watching, further listening. 2001's Paid in Full with Wood Harris and Mekhi Phifer is a really underrated
great movie.
That worked pretty well. Yeah, it's great, and I feel like not underrated, but I feel like nobody knows it exists. Like, people that have seen it really like it.
And if you want another like absolutely menacing, terrifying, and charismatic performances by a very talented rapper, Cameron in Paid in Full is like the Buns role in this movie.
Yeah, he's so good. Yeah,
he's so evil in that fucking movie.
I really love Paid in Full.
Paid in Full is great.
State Property is not exactly a good movie, but it fits the theme.
No, State Property is a classic. State Property is a much-watched movie. Is it a good movie? Like, not especially, but is it a very wildly entertaining movie? Absolutely. State Property is a fucking classic.
Well, that's why I said it isn't exactly good, but it is good.
Yeah. There's no such thing as like a movie so bad it's good. If you enjoy watching it, it's a good movie. State Property is and Beanie Siegel is, again, another very talented rapper turned actor. Beanie is fucking great as in State Property.
I actually, after I made this,
you either get down or you lay down. I mean, come on, like how many movies do you remember like a line and a scene that vividly from other than state property.
Oh no, and when I say when I say something's not exactly good, because I've talked about that a few times on here, that I don't believe in the idea of so bad it's good. If you enjoy it, it's good. But like, there's the way I say it is, you know how you talk about somebody's like not classically handsome or whatever. Like, that movie's not classically good, but it's good.
No,
like,
it's
that's
like,
how I say it.
Is it as like, professionally made, or like in terms of like I don't know, like the acting, the script, the way it's photographed? Like, no, but it is a very compelling, extremely entertaining movie, and like I said, worth it for the scene in the beginning, and the very beginning of the first instance of Get Down or Lay Down, where it's like on the street corner, there's like the old head who's running the neighborhood, and he's this corny dude, and he's like, yeah, you young guys need to, like, pay respect to me on the block or whatever. And then Beanie Siegel just beats him to death with a baseball bat and dumps his body in a dumpster. Just chucks his body in a dumpster.
I'm watching that tonight. It's been quite a while since I've seen State Property, actually, so it's time for a revisit.
And State Property 2, featuring Noriega and Freeway, are both in that.
I don't think I even knew there was a sequel.
Oh yeah, State Property 2. Check it out.
Well, I'm going to. That's there. I'm going to. You just gave me something to check out here. Further listening, Dragon's opposite of H2O. I said Dragon had a good album. WC and the Mad Circle's Curb Servant is, and I realize Curb Servant's not even WC and the Mad Circle's most loved album, but it's the one I think of the most when I think of them. There's a whole song in there where he fantasizes about killing the Clintons. Well, because Bill was president at the time. And then Half a Million is a pretty great album. So there's my suggestions. And Will gave us Straight Property 2. So you got some stuff to check out if you like Belly, if you check it out because of this episode. So Will, thank you so much for coming on and talking Belly with me. I really appreciate it. And let everyone know where they can find you.
Just at Will Menaker on Twitter, or Chapo Trap House on Patreon.
Yep. And I'll put those both in the show description. All right, Will. Had a blast like the last time, and wildly different movies going from Escape from LA to Belly, but I'm glad we did it. So
both the works of two visionary auteur geniuses, though. So.
You're damn right, and you're like somebody who absolutely got Belly, which is part of the reason I reached out to you. So I'm glad you had the time to fit this one in for me. So all right, well, Will, I'm gonna let you get out of here. You have a great night, and everyone listening at home, thank you all so much for your support.
Cheers. Bye.
No use running, ain't nowhere to hide. The beast is coming, and he's got you in his sights. He ain't gonna miss you, and he ain't gonna mess around. If you're a movie with original songs, the soundtrack